Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members, I have received communication from the Honourable Stuart Young, MP, Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, Ms. Vandana Mohit, MP, Member for Chaguanas East, and Dr. Rudal Munilal, MP, Member for Oropouche East, who have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the annual report of the Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation for fiscal year 2012 and 2013. The report by the Cabinet-appointed expert committee on the causes of the island-wide power outage on Wednesday, the 16th February 2022.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Number 2, the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ended September 30th, 2021. And 3, the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2021. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that papers 2 and 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honourable members, the question is that papers 2 and 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have the honour to lay the report of the Cabinet-appointed team to conduct an independent investigation into the abuse of children at children's homes, rehabilitation centres, and other institutions which provide residential care for children.
Reports from committees.
Member for Aruka Maloney.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honour to present the following report. The interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Representation of the People Amendment Number 2 Bill 2020, second session 2021 to 2022, 12th Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister's questions. Urgent questions.
The member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, having regard to the internal memorandum issued by the CEO of MIC, will the Minister inform this House whether the members of staff of the MIC Institute of Technology were paid their salaries and allowances for the month of April?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The answer is yes.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister inform this House why was the memo issued and what caused the delay?
One question. One question. Member for Couva South, one question.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister inform this House why was the memo issued?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the memo was not issued from my office. It was issued from the MIC. Therefore, I cannot explain why that memo would have been issued, because the staff have been paid.
Member for Cuba South.
Madam Speaker, the line minister for MIC. Has the minister sought an explanation from MIC as it relates to the issuance of this particular memo?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when the issuance of the memo came to my attention, I inquired from the Ministry of Education whether the check had been given to MIC. At that time, it had been sent, and the information coming from the MIC is that salaries were issued on the 27th and the 28th of April.
Member for Cuba South.
Follow-up, supplemental, Madam Speaker.
These are urgent questions. So you're invited to ask question number 2, which is in your name.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, having regard to the internal memorandum issued by the Assistant Vice President of Human Resource and Administration of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, will the Minister inform this House whether members of staff of the University of Trinidad and Tobago were paid their salaries and allowances for the month of April?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The answer is yes.
Member for Cuba South.
Madam Speaker, could the Minister inform this House if she is aware that this is an ongoing problem being experienced by the staff of the University of Trinidad and Tobago?
Member, from the answer, I'll allow you another supplemental, but from the answer, I'm not going to allow that question. So maybe you'd like to ask another question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, could the Minister inform this House as to why was this internal memorandum issued by the office holder at the University of Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member keeps asking me to explain the actions of persons other than myself. What I, as the Minister of Education, as the Minister of Education, the line minister, am entitled to do is to ensure that the check is disbursed and that the persons are paid. And the information from the Ministry of Education is that the check was disbursed and persons were paid on the 25th and 26th of April, 2022.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister inform this House, based on the cash flow situation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, is the government on the verge of bankruptcy?
Member, I rule that question out of order based on the standing orders.
Questions on notice?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's one question for written response, and we're asking for a 2-week deferral for presentation of that response.
That would be question 155?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Okay, so honorable members, question number 155 is deferred for 2 weeks.
Statements by ministers.
Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have been directed by the Cabinet to make a statement on the report of the Cabinet-appointed team to conduct an independent investigation into the abuse of children at children's homes, rehabilitation centers, and other institutions which provide residential care for children. Cabinet in June 2021 approved the conduct of an independent investigation into the abuse of children at children's homes, rehabilitation centers, and other institutions which provide residential care for children, and the establishment of an 11-person investigation team. The team was headed by retired appeal court judge, Justice Judith Jones, and included representation from civil society organizations. The team commenced their work in July 2021 and submitted the report of the investigation on December 13, 2021. The team's remit included inter alia reviewing reports, other documents and newspaper articles on allegations of abuse of children, identifying and documenting the abuse, and developing solutions to prevent and eliminate all forms of abuse, compiling the events leading to absconding in children's homes and child support centers, reviewing policies and procedures for appropriate care and identifying gaps where necessary, and making recommendations to ensure that adequate policies and procedures are in place for the treatment of children and the prevention of abuse. The investigation team collected primary and secondary data. Some of the main sources of data included site visits to children's homes, child support centers, and rehabilitation centers. During this investigation, the team conducted 21 site visits to community residences and child support centers. 23 residential care institutions were selected using the set criteria, which were further ranked by low, medium, or high priority. Interviews with the staff at community residences, residents, former residents of facilities, and former and current employees of the Children's Authority. Overall, 46 interviews were conducted by the investigation team. Document review. As part of the process, the investigation team focused on areas of safeguarding as well as sexual and physical abuse. Some of the major findings of the team with regard to selected areas of focus were as follows: abuse and absconding at the traditional government-funded children's homes, Valsain Child Support Center, and the Youth Training and Rehabilitation Center. It was discovered that incident reports are not fully capturing the extent of physical abuse occurring. Lack of proper supervision facilitates physical abuse among residents. Staff promote a culture that encourages abuse among residents. Security officers were found guilty of abusing residents. The inclusion of children in need of supervision at child support centers has exposed the staff to child offenders. The staff is not trained to deal with this form of behavior. The guards, especially the external guards, are not trained to deal with children. At the Youth Training and Rehabilitation Center, physical abuse occurs very rarely. There's a plethora of regulations and layers of oversight that makes the use of excessive force difficult to go undetected. In addition to major security concerns, the investigation team, through its interviews, has found that the following are some reasons why residents abscond from these facilities. The discipline meted out to the residents is subjective and, in some cases, unorthodox. The lack of structured and educational activities has been complained about by residents who have openly stated that they miss their classes while at these facilities and that they want to get an education. Complaints made by residents are not being taken seriously by those in authority. Residents miss their families, and in some instances, stay is longer than first anticipated at the facilities. Under legislation guiding the safeguarding, care, and protection of children is confusing and ineffective with respect to enforcement of its provisions and the creation of offenses. The legislation facilitates a hybrid system of care for children, residents in children's homes, children who have the benefit of orders of the court, with respect of whom the Children's Authority is mandated to provide care and treatment, and children who do not, thereby creating an unequal system of care. Under public financing for child protection, the number of children in need of licensed children's homes, community residences, and hostels is greater than the current capacity. All existing facilities are understaffed and under-resourced for the number of children in their care and cannot operate at capacity. Under child protection system, the Children's Authority is not adequately or efficiently fulfilling its mandate, its statutory mandate. The most critical risk facing the authority is that it is not structured and staffed to deliver the mandate outlined in the legislation. Madam Speaker, many recommendations were put forth by the investigation team. Some of the key recommendations made by the team under the main headings include: under legislation, there's a need to consolidate all the amendments to the Act. The ongoing development of a national child protection strategy must be prioritized with clear and measurable standards for all persons interacting with children in Trinidad and Tobago. Under enforcement of licensing and monitoring requirements for children's homes, an independent, publicly funded children's commissioner should be established. Under more effective state coordination and collaboration, an interagency task force should also be established under the Office of the Prime Minister to coordinate the national system and integrate operations across state agencies and ministries for the effective and timely delivery of care and protection of children in Trinidad and Tobago. The task force to include representatives from the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. Under operations of the Children's Authority, the board to conduct its organizational redesign with urgency, given that effective organizational design is fundamental for the delivery of the authority's mandate and directly impacts upon all other risks to the organization and children in the care of the state. Under recommendations to help curb the gross abuse of children, in relation to the caregiver ratio, the Children's Authority is to ensure that a standard caregiver to child ratio dependent on the child's age, the child's risks and needs is maintained at community residences and child support centers. The Children's Authority should have an internal security force trained to treat with children in residential care. This security function should also extend to private children's homes. While this will be a cost to the authority and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the returns will be in children's safety, protection, and care. In relation to critical incidences, standardized criteria for classifying and reporting critical incidents should be established and enforced. The Parliament is asked to note that the report by the investigation team was considered by the Cabinet in March 2022, and the Cabinet agreed to: 1, the submission of the report to the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs for a review of the legislative recommendations. 2, the establishment of a task force to review the findings and recommendations of the said report and to develop an action plan for implementation, divided into short, medium, and long-term categories with appropriate timeframes. The task force has a timeframe of 6 weeks' time from the date of commencement of meetings to submit to Cabinet the completed work plan. 3, the following composition of the task force: the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, 1 officer each from the Child Affairs Division and the Policy Research and Planning Division, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the manager and 2 representatives, the Tobago House of Assembly, 2 members of the investigation team. The task force will be chaired by a senior official of the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs. Madam Speaker, the government remains committed to the establishment of a robust child protection system in keeping with national and international development objectives, and to the resourcing of agencies with responsibility for effecting the system. Consequently, several initiatives are being undertaken under the implementation plan for the National Child Policy to ensure that our nation's children are protected, and through various initiatives under the remit of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and the Ministries of Social Development and Family Services, National Security and Youth Development, and National Service for Transitional Services. The estimated expenditure for the...
Honourable Minister, your speaking time is now spent. Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 24.4, could the Minister identify the recommendations of the report that have been completed thus far, that have been implemented, thus far?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, as I would have indicated in the presentation, under the rollout of the National Child Policy, a number of the recommendations have indeed have been implemented. We've already established the task force. Madam Speaker, it is important to note that in terms of the investment that is being made through the various ministries identified, we have, for this fiscal year, allocated $126,881,715 to ensure that all the recommendations, as far as possible, are indeed implemented.
It's only one question allowed. Thank you, Minister. Minister of Public Utilities. Leader of the House.
Speaker, I would just like to indicate, and I apologize to you and to my colleague, by agreement, we have by agreement approved that the statements will be read to conclusion. So I apologize to my colleague and to the House for not moving the requisite motion. May I do so now, please? Thank you.
So it's by agreement?
It is by agreement.
That
both statements.
Well, we can't go back to both.
I won't. I know, but
all right.
I'm just saying.
So,
sorry.
yes,
Sorry, I apologize.
Yes. So, it is agreed. Yes. Member, the Minister of Public Utilities.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have been authorized by the Cabinet to make the following statement with respect to the report of the Cabinet-appointed expert committee appointed to investigate the causes of and the national response to the island-wide power outage that occurred in Trinidad on Wednesday, the 16th of February, 2022. Madam Speaker, on Wednesday, the 16th of February 2022, at approximately 12:52 p.m., there was a failure of the entire electricity grid in Trinidad, which plunged the island into a total blackout. The blackout lasted some 12.5 hours, with initial restoration at 6:50 p.m., and the final customer's supply returning at 1:34 a.m. on Thursday, the 17th of February, 2022. In response to this prolonged island-wide power outage, a 3-member committee was established by the government to investigate, among other matters, the circumstances under which gave rise to the failure of the electricity supply system, the process for restoring power supply, and the status of physical security of TNTEC's facilities, and to make recommendation to avoid a recurrence of a nationwide power outage. The members of the committee were as follows, Professor Chandraban Sharma, retired professor of electrical and computer engineering of the University of the West Indies, was the chair. Mr. Keith Cudjoe, former chairman of TNTEC. Superintendent Alistair Guevara of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The committee was given a period of 1 month from its date of appointment, that is, by March the 22nd, 2022, to report its findings and report to the Office of the Prime Minister, and was allowed to co-opt any expertise and resources that it required. The committee completed its investigations and submitted its report to the Honorable Prime Minister on April the 5th, 2022. The power grid before the blackout. Madam Speaker, the committee reported that at the time of the incident, the 3 independent power producers were supplying some 1,130 megawatts of electricity to TNTEC for distribution to its customers in Trinidad from their 4 power stations as follows. The Trinidad Generation Unlimited, TGU, Labre, at 537 megawatts. The PowerGen, Point Lisas, at 472 megawatts. And at Penal, 50 megawatts. And Trinity Power Limited, Point Lisas, at 71 megawatts. The committee noted that the country's electricity grid is a robust one with reasonable redundancy and generally well operated, that no electricity grid is without risk or immune to failure. The causes of the island-wide blackout. According to the report of the committee, on Wednesday, the 16th of February, 2022, a 21.64 meter tall fungal affected palmist tree fell in the vicinity of Grand Straits Extension Road and the NGC private road in Rosilac. The said tree fell onto a single-phase TNTEC 12 kilovolt distribution line. At the time of the occurrence, this trigger incident, the country was under a high wind yellow alert issued by the Meteorological Office of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I wish to confirm that the committee unequivocally stated that it did not find any evidence of sabotage as a trigger for the failure. The sequence of consequential events as recorded by the committee was as follows. 1. The palmist tree eventually fell off the 12 kilovolt line, causing the line to sag, oscillate, and upswing, and to come into contact with the 220 kilovolt line circuit, which transmits most of the power from TGU generating facility to TNTEC. The 12 kilovolt line crosses orthogonally on the 220 kilovolt transmission by a distance of over 4 meters, which is more than 2 times the minimum stipulated by international standards. The fault occasioned by the 2 lines accidentally coming into contact with each other caused the protection relays on the 2 circuits on the 220 kilovolt transmission line to trip sequentially and become de-energized, thereby isolating the TGU plant from the grid. The de-energizing of the 220 kilovolt transmission line created a large imbalance between available running generation supply of 537 megawatts with a load of 68.75 megawatts, resulting in a very rapid increase in generation speeds at the TGU plant as the essentially unloaded turbines accelerated. The turbines immediately tripped on overspeed protection, disconnecting all generators at TGU, thereby resulting in a 47% loss of generating capacity. 4. The sudden loss of 47% of generating capacity on the grid was too fast for the system's circuit breakers to shed load to match the available generation. In the circumstances, the other IPPs experienced underspeed and under-frequency conditions which exceeded their stability limits, leading to a cascading outage and the collapse of the entire electricity grid, first at the Point Lisas plants and then at Penal. Madam Speaker, the entire episode from the triggering of the event by the fallen palmist tree on the 12 kilovolt distribution line to the shutdown of the entire grid, resulting in an island-wide blackout, spanned about 3.6 seconds. Given the speed at which the events unfolded, the committee concluded that there was no time for human intervention to prevent the outage. The response. The report acknowledged that the safe and timely re-establishment of power on the island following a total shutdown, as what occurred on Wednesday, the 16th of February 2022, is a complex and critical task which requires a close coordination between TNTEC and the IPPs and should be based on well-documented and tested black start procedures. Such restarts must be done under the direction and the supervision of TNTEC. In this regard, Madam Speaker, the report noted that 3 of the 4 power plants in Trinidad had black start capabilities on the day, and that within 1 hour of the outage, all 3 generation plants operated by TGU and PowerGen, following their procedures, attempted starting their black start units. However, there was multiple failed attempts occasioned inter alia by the lack of preparedness among the agencies, the independent power producers and TNTEC for such an eventuality, the unavailability of black start units, the inadequate technical capacity for dealing with such a situation, and the absence of documented power system restoration plan governing the sequencing procedures to be followed after a total loss of power on the island. Power was eventually restored at 6:50 p.m. to Penal, and from there, the rest of the power system was re-energized by 1:34 a.m. the following day, February 17th, 2022. The assessment of response and recommendations. The committee identified several weaknesses in the management of the response, including ineffective communication with the public, with heavy reliance on the internet and social media, which was negatively impacted by the blackout. The absence of involvement of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management. The lack of a systemic approach in the restoration process, which led to many unforced errors in the re-energization process. The committee was also of the opinion that no single person took on the role of incident commander and had overall authority as well as detailed knowledge of the restoration process. At the same time, the committee recognized the initiative of the protective services to trigger a commendable response in the circumstances. The committee has made several recommendations to address the weaknesses identified, as well as to improve the resilience of the electricity grid and to reduce the country's vulnerabilities to the recurrence of such an incident. One of the key recommendations to improve security, reliability, and efficiency of the transmission grid is the construction of another 220 kilovolt circuit from the Union substation to the Gandhi substation. The construction of this second line is already at an advanced stage, Madam Speaker, with completion scheduled for the first quarter of fiscal 2023. The report noted that the unfortunate event had unmasked several issues pertaining to all parties involved, and that several of the problems encountered in restarting the plants were evident in 2013 when the system suffered a similar collapse. The need to ensure that this was not another lost opportunity for distilling valuable lessons of experience and building resilience into the system was underscored. In this regard, the report made the following noteworthy observations. That one should, and I quote, never let a good crisis go to waste, unquote. A famous observation made by Winston Churchill during the bleakest days of World War II. All of the digital protection relays in the power sector have inherent in their design auto event recorders. This event has generated a veritable motherlode of usable data, which TNTEC can mine to optimize their current models of the power system, as well as updating the entire constraints used in modeling the generators and turbines. The IPPs and TNTEC staff did make unforced errors in the re-energization process. This can be easily remedied by ensuring that the operators are schooled in the understanding of the issues involved in a de-energized grid and the safe process to re-energize the grid. The report concluded that there was great inconvenience to the population. There was no loss of life directly attributable to the outage. The blackout had laid bare the many shortcomings of our disaster preparedness and restoration procedures. Madam Speaker, finally, the following key recommendations were made. Additional training of operational staff of the IPPs and TNTEC specific to the recovery of the grid from a total blackout. The establishment of clear documented procedures related to the complete recovery of the grid from a total blackout. Categorization of the total blackout as a national disaster, thereby automatically fully engaging the ODPM in the process. 4. Establishment of the manager system control and generation interface as the incident commander in the future. And 5. Construction of additional transmission infrastructure to further strengthen the grid with priority on the completion of the second 220 kilovolt line as soon as possible. 6. An annual independent power system resilience review and power system risk assessment should be performed to identify power system vulnerabilities that can lead to catastrophic power system failures. This should be reviewed by an independent technical standing committee. May I take this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to thank the members of the committee for their diligence, their patriotism, and professionalism in preparing the report for the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to assure the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that the recommendations in this report will be given urgent consideration and will form part of a program of work in the electricity sector in the short and medium term. Madam Speaker, the government also takes this opportunity to thank the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for their patience during these very uncertain hours. Today, I lay this report and ask that it be sent for further examination by the Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Princestown.
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 24-4, based on the Minister's frightening admission that no one was in charge of the situation on the day of the blackout, could the Minister identify the recommendations of the report that have been implemented thus far to avoid reoccurrence, including cutting of the trees?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I had a meeting with the committee as well as the Executive Management and Board of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, and I'm pleased to advise the Honourable Member that an appropriate officer and the department was already identified to take lead if and when, and God forbid, such an event should occur again.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister.
Leader of the House.
Again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, having regard to the interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the representation of the people, Amendment Number 2, Bill 2020, Second Session 2021 to 2022, 12th Parliament, I beg to move that the committee be allowed an extension to September 2nd, 2022 to complete its work and submit a final report.
Honourable members, the question is that a Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the representation of the people, Amendment Number 2, Bill 2020, be allowed an extension to September 2nd, 2022 to complete its work and submit a final report. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Public business, committee business, motions.
Honorable members, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, will be resumed. Be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. If there are no other speakers, I'll therefore call. Member for Fyzabad.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on the motion to adopt the report of the JSC on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. Madam Speaker, as we seek to approve the report of this Joint Select Committee, we join several nations across the world that have already made provisions in one form or another for the legitimate use of marijuana, Trinidad and Tobago having already decriminalized its use under certain conditions in 2019. Madam Speaker, allow me to thank all colleagues who sat on the JSC and worked so well to bring this report before us today. In particular, I wish to thank my colleagues on this side, the member for Mayaro and the member for Kamoto Manzilina, and indeed the member for Chaguanas West, who raised some very important points with regards to the provisions for religious use in certain circumstances. And in this regard, I urge the House to consider the issues raised by my colleague, the member for Chaguanas West. We are here today, Madam Speaker, to further advance Trinidad and Tobago's effort to make medicinal marijuana available to those of our citizens who need it, as well as to provide a legal framework to create economic benefit for our citizens. Madam Speaker, medicinal marijuana has been in use for centuries. In fact, it was recognized for its medicinal value long ago by the Chinese. It was used in ancient Egypt and India, by the ancient Greeks, and by the Arabic physicians in the medieval Islamic world. Indeed, Madam Speaker, the Chinese Emperor Sheng Nong, who himself was a pharmacologist at that time, in his book, in 2037 BCE, recommended the substance for treating constipation, gout, rheumatism, and absent-mindedness. The ancient Egyptians used it in suppositories for painful hemorrhoids. The ancient Greeks used the dry leaves of cannabis to treat nosebleeds and cannabis seeds to expel tapeworms. Surviving texts from ancient India show that doctors used it for a variety of ailments, including relieving pain in childbirth. The Arabic physicians recognized the analgesic, the antiemetic, and the antipyretic properties of cannabis and used it extensively from the 8th to as recently as the 18th century. So, Madam Speaker, we are on solid ground today as we attempt to give cannabis a legal basis for its use as a medicine. Madam Speaker, Appendix 4 of this JSC report before us has a consolidated version of the bill with the amendments, and I intend to tie my contribution to several of the clauses in the bill, especially Part 5 on medicinal cannabis. Madam Speaker, if you will allow me to start at the end of the bill and just to mention with Clause 68, which gives the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority, the authority that will be created by this legislation, gives it the power to make regulations with the approval of the minister. And I must say, Madam Speaker, I'm a little bit disappointed that some of the draft regulations have not accompanied this bill, but nevertheless, one can accept the argument that perhaps the authority has to be created first and board appointed before this function can be exercised. But, Madam Speaker, I just want to point out that in other jurisdictions, laws pertaining to medicinal cannabis, have been more detailed, and I refer especially to the Antigua and Barbuda legislation. But nevertheless, Madam Speaker, I want to fully endorse Clause 68, the Amendment 3, that speaks to regulations made under this Act shall be subject to the affirmative resolution of Parliament. And I look forward to that debate when the time comes, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, Part 5, medicinal cannabis. Now, Clause 42, Section 1, creates an offense for persons using medicinal cannabis without a prescription or recommendation from a medical practitioner. The penalties are not insignificant and include both fines and imprisonment. In fact, Madam Speaker, if I can just read the clause into the record. And that's 42.1. It says that a person who uses medicinal cannabis without being authorized to use medicinal cannabis by a prescription or a recommendation from a medical practitioner commits an offense and is liable to A, on summary conviction, to a fine of $10,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 6 months, or on conviction on indictment to a fine of $100,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 10 years. So indeed, quite a bit not insignificant penalties, Madam Speaker. And this section implies that a medical practitioner can authorize a patient to use medicinal cannabis by issuing either a prescription or a recommendation. So, Madam Speaker, I want to put a few questions on the table with regards to this, which I believe require further elucidation from the government, and I look forward to some answers in the winding up by the government. So I raise these matters, Madam Speaker, from the perspective of a medical practitioner, as well as a citizen, a representative of the people, and who knows, Madam Speaker, even as a potential future patient seeking to treat the aches and pains that come with age, Madam Speaker. So I just want to ask a few questions, Madam Speaker. What do we really mean by medicinal cannabis? Well, it's defined in the interpretations, Section 3, means that cannabis is handled under a license issued under Section 29.1, and it goes on to give 8 situations where licenses can be issued. But I think also what will be on the public's mind, everyone's mind, is that what products will be prescribed or recommended and in what circumstances. That is, which medical conditions will qualify. And I just raise that point, Madam Speaker, because in other legislation, other jurisdictions, we have in the parent legislation what is called qualifying medical conditions. I trust that this will come with the regulations, but I just raise that point. And the third point, which I think is important, Madam Speaker, is which medical practitioners will be allowed to prescribe. Now, the legislation appears to be straightforward and says that registered medical practitioners, but again, I think the point is important in terms of training and whether there will be authorization and certification of particular medical practitioners to prescribe medicinal cannabis, Madam Speaker, to protect the public's interests. So, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Health, in his contribution at the last debate on this motion, did spoke a little bit about the medical conditions in children. I just want to support that. Minister mentioned about Dravet syndrome, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which affects about 15 children in Trinidad. I would want to support the use of that product that was mentioned, Epidiolex, and has been approved by the FDA. So I support that recommendation, Madam Speaker. But I also want to say that this drug is not a miracle cure for all childhood epileptics, nor for that matter, other epileptics. And I say this because I wanted to make a point about the protection of children with regards to medicinal cannabis, Madam Speaker. And if you will permit me to refer to the report of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana 2018, subtitled Waiting to Exhale, Safeguarding Our Future Through Responsible Socio-Legal Policy on Marijuana. Quite an important report, Madam Speaker, very interesting. Covers the wide remit of marijuana use, but has an important section on medicinal use. And there were some interesting developments here, Madam Speaker. So they use the young people's term, Madam Speaker, huh? Meaning what? So I said, they say, well, that's no big thing. It's already here. So I said, well, where's the evidence? So on my phone here, Madam Speaker, this is the response I have, and I read, Madam Speaker, with your permission. So this was the response. Hi, these are the dessert forms that you can get the weed edibles in, and attached below is a flyer that they use to advertise a sale for the products. Nowhere on the page it explicitly says that it's weed, but in the captions of the photos, the sentence, they're sweet, they creep. Don't eat too much, just take a munch. Madam Speaker, there's a flyer that accompanies this. It says sleepers, $4.20, treat yourself. 4 for $120. Fruity Pebbles, cereal treat, Oscar the Grouch cookie, Slutty Brown, Oreo Swirl. And there's also a number, Madam Speaker, that you can actually call and have these products delivered to you in the comfort and convenience of your own home. Madam Speaker, I make this point simply to say that this industry is already in Trinidad, and therefore, again, the processor license, which will become available because of this legislation, will now allow these entrepreneurs to bring their business legally and take it to the market. So, Madam Speaker, in terms of the prescribing, the other question we had asked is who is to prescribe and recommend these products? The Minister of Health in this contribution did allude to the fact that, there's training at the St. Augustine campus for medical students in terms of cannabis, pharmacology and so on. That's important. But I just want to say, Madam Speaker, in my 38 years experience as a medical practitioner, I will be very reluctant to prescribe medicinal cannabis unless I undergo the required training. And I just wanted to make that point, that we need to get the TTMA involved. Minister mentioned that, but I think we need to suggest some sort of formal engagement and perhaps some support from the government in terms of how that training will take place, Madam Speaker. And I just want to thank the president of the TTMA, who I would have engaged as part of my research. And they're happy to have medicinal cannabis as part of the armamentarium for treating patients, but of course they look forward to more detailed structure and regulations and so on. And of course, Madam Speaker, we spoke about the training aspect of it, but there's also the authorization and certification aspect. And in some jurisdictions, they speak about an authorized medical practitioner, as opposed to being just registered to prescribe. And therefore, the question has to be asked, what role, if any, that the Medical Board of Trinidad and Tobago will have in authorizing or certifying those practitioners, or whether it will be the Cannabis Authority or whether it will be the Ministry of Health who will certify these practitioners. What is the practice in other jurisdictions, medicinal cannabis? On the other hand, in Croatia, the medical prescription is issued by a general practitioner with recommendation from a specialist. Right here in the Caribbean, Madam Speaker, in Jamaica, cannabis for medicinal or therapeutic purposes must be recommended or prescribed by a registered physician or health professional certified by the Ministry of Health. So we are talking here of another category of persons who might be able to prescribe or recommend medicinal cannabis. And so this is a result of the certification. So, Madam Speaker, I just want to move on quickly. I know the issue of a dispensary came up in the discussion the last time, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to make the point, and I seek clarification when the Attorney General winds up, because when I examine, Madam Speaker, the retail distributor license, which is Section 29E, it says a retail distributor license which shall be used to allow for the operation of a dispensary for the dispensing of medicinal cannabis to patients. But look at the definition of dispensary. And it says, any premises on which the sale, dispensing or provision of medicinal cannabis prescribed or recommended by a medical practitioner, or the use or consumption of medicinal cannabis by a patient. So this, Madam Speaker, is suggesting that under this retail distributor license, where you would have the license to, to have a dispensary, that you can actually make provision for the use of also the consumption of medicinal cannabis by a patient. And the reason is because in other jurisdictions, Madam Speaker, and it's clearly spelled out, for example, in the Antigua and Barbuda legislation, the law, that there is something called a medical cannabis consumption lounge, where you're allowed to sample the products and so on, and you can actually consume the product there. But I raise that in the context of one important point, Madam Speaker, because I'm thinking that if it is that the law allows you to do this, and you consume a product in the consumption in the medicinal cannabis lounge, and then you have to drive home, what happens to you? So this took my mind now to, Madam Speaker, to driving and the use of cannabis. And I also make this point in regards to you receiving a prescription, a medical prescription for cannabis, Madam Speaker, and you will take your precautions. You'll be advised by the doctor, the pharmacist, a couple hours, don't drive, don't operate machinery, and so on. But God forbid, and sometimes you have elderly people who will benefit from these prescriptions, and they go out on the road, God forbid they get into an accident, and they have a blood sample done, and cannabis is found in their blood. I'm just saying, Madam Speaker, what is the situation with regards to the law in terms of whether they'll be protected? And I guess that is an area that the Attorney General may want to look at in terms of whether there will be a certain amount of time that will be required before you can operate machinery or drive and so on. I think that's something that we need to consider, Madam Speaker. Time seems to be moving on very quickly, Madam Speaker, but I would want to believe that those are the points that I want to make. There's one more point I want to make, Madam Speaker, before I close. And this is with regards to clauses 43 and 44, which address the issue of record keeping by medical practitioners. But Madam Speaker, in this country, we have a situation where patients go doctor shopping. So I want to make sure that whether in the parent legislation or in the regulations, that the issue of patients accessing prescriptions and recommendations from different medical practitioners and filling these at different pharmacies and dispensaries, that we make sure that we safeguard against that. Because we can easily create a situation, Madam Speaker, where you can have patients abusing the drug or collecting, in Trinidad there's a thing where you go to all the pharmacies, you collect these medications and you sell it in the black market. So that could be something we have to guard against, Madam Speaker. And I close by suggesting that the idea of a medical card, which could be linked to electronic tracking, will be something that we can look at in terms of detecting abuse. So, Madam Speaker, again, I thank you for the opportunity. Time seems to be against me. I want to close on the issue of human rights and health. Just to say, in the US and Canada, there is already case law that support the right of an individual to cultivate and use cannabis for personal health reasons in that individual's private home. We've already crossed that bridge here in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, again, the CARICOM Commission report found that there is widespread use of cannabis despite prohibition. Concerns for increased usage after legislation seem to be unfounded. And on the balance, Madam Speaker, the evidence points to more good than harm. I correct that, Madam Speaker. The evidence points to more good than harm in using medicinal cannabis. So I say, Madam Speaker, it's time for us to take the ladder that this bill provides to the next phase and approve cannabis for its long-recognized medicinal value. I believe our citizens deserve no less, both from a health and a human rights perspective. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Tobago West.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on this cannabis control legislation or this report coming from the Joint Select Committee. Madam Speaker, this is the second day of our debate, and I think that it is clear that both the government and the opposition agree. Not very often we do, but today we agree on matters relating to cannabis, and I'm pleased to see that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is, I'm excited, happy to participate in this debate. I'm 40 years old, and I didn't believe that in my lifetime, Madam Speaker, we would get to a place of agreeing, or a government in the Caribbean would get to a place of decriminalizing marijuana, or cannabis as we know it, or as it should be called. Madam Speaker, I grew up in a Rasta house, or a Rastafarian house, Madam Speaker. And for some reason, not for some reason, Madam Speaker, there was this belief back then in the 1980s and the 1990s that if you're a Rasta, you have weed in your house. Yes? Children going to school would be provoked by friends. Teachers would have their views and spread their stories about Rasta children or children coming out of Rasta homes. And police would run up in your house every now and then looking for weed. Just because you're a Rasta, you're expected to have weed on you or in your house. Madam Speaker, my father was Rasta, and I could tell you I didn't know what weed looked like until I got to college. So I spent my 22 years in Trinidad and Tobago in a Rasta house and didn't know what weed looked like. And my father protected us fiercely. So if he smoked as a child, I didn't know. I never saw it. I never smelled it on him. He was a respected man, an upstanding man. But the things we had to face in school and in society, it's traumatic, Madam Speaker. So at 40 years old, now to witness this easing up in position, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the Caribbean, it's a breath of fresh air. Because as a child, Madam Speaker, I often wondered why this hardcore war on cannabis and not a hardcore war on alcoholism. And we saw what alcohol was doing to our communities. No hard-on war on tobacco. And we saw the effects that tobacco had on the health of people as it relates to lung cancer and so on. So as a young person, I always wondered why. And as I investigated and researched, I recognized this is based more on economics rather than science. So, Madam Speaker, I'm happy that today, even in naming the legislation, we are speaking about cannabis and not about marijuana, or making a distinction between marijuana and hemp. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about cannabis. And I wondered, how did we get from printing Bibles on cannabis paper and making clothing out of cannabis way back then, decades gone, centuries gone, to this hard-on war that somewhat oppressed our people, discriminated against many, and caused unrest in our society. I always wondered that as a teenager, Madam Speaker, and then I believed that it was based on economics rather than science, and personally, Madam Speaker, today, I still do believe the same. So we as Caribbean people, we have a long, strong historical, cultural, and religious significance as it relates to weed. Or should I say weed has a long, strong historical, cultural, and religious significance to us. As a matter of fact, we can trace cannabis to several ethnic, religious, and cultural traditions within Africa, India, Asia, and many Middle Eastern countries. It was famous for its healing properties and was used socially and religiously. In the early 1900s, it was introduced in Caribbean countries like Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago by East Indian indentured laborers. That's based on the research available to us, Madam Speaker. The designation of cannabis as an unlawful substance and as a dangerous drug is of recent vintage, Madam Speaker. We're talking about the 1920s, 1930s, at that time when the Opium Convention just came into being. But for most of us in the Caribbean, we hear stories from our grandparents and great-grandparents about the use of cannabis as like an in thing, Madam Speaker, and that is also cited in the 2018 CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana report. So I go back to asking, how did we get to that place of prohibition or this hard-on criminalization as it relates to marijuana? Matter of fact, when the Opium Convention came into being in the 1920s, India said, how are we going to control this? How are we going to comply? Because marijuana was growing technically everywhere in certain areas and was such a normal part of socializing and religion and so on. So, Madam Speaker, we've witnessed over the years other developments throughout the First World that would have led to criminalization of cannabis. The Canadian Parliament shares its history about adding cannabis to the list of dangerous drugs, where there was no debate, no consultation, and even members of the Parliament then wondered how did it happen. We look at the FBI and the history of policing in the United States, and we hear about Harry J. Anslinger, who was a leader in the FBI, who created these war files, pretty much discriminating against Mexicans and different races, Madam Speaker. And this war on drugs caused we as Caribbean people and other countries who wish to trade with the US and with the First World to pretty much toe the line without asking questions, without doing our scientific research, but wanting to participate in trade and wanting to be good world citizens, Madam Speaker. However, over the years, the First World continued its research and continued to work towards utilizing cannabis for its healing purposes like they had known from the get-go about cannabis, Madam Speaker, and looked at the commercialization of cannabis. So we saw the USA and Canada moving full speed ahead. We witnessed on our end how these policies hindered the progress of our society, oppressing young men and causing trauma in our families, Madam Speaker. As an MP, many of us can speak about young people or people who came to us looking for jobs. And you would first refer them to a cleaning company or to MTS or to one of these companies. They don't have CXC subjects and so on, but they would, MTS and companies like that would ask for their certificate of good character. And many would come back to you saying, my certificate of good character, I wouldn't get a certificate of good character because I had a weed charge in my earlier days. And I've seen as a student in the United States, at my college, where students failed drug tests or had that on their record, had that charge on their record and couldn't get access to scholarships. So how do we wage a war against poverty and then allow a war on drugs that criminalizes people or stains your record for possession of small amounts of marijuana, or should we say cannabis? The two just doesn't go hand in hand. So I'm happy to see over the years the decriminalization, and we as a country, we have done that too, but I think we need to pay, or we have paid attention to the US and Canada moving full speed ahead developing for medicinal purposes and for economic purposes. Madam Speaker, this is a war on drugs that was primarily based on regional hegemony, and we were towing the lines, not based on science at all, Madam Speaker. So here we are about 100 years after the Opium Convention, and we are somewhat behind in an area where we should naturally have a comparative advantage. For example, 10 years ago, United States, several states within the US began legalizing the commercial sale of marijuana. By that time, Madam Speaker, the state of Colorado already had a well-established marijuana market in place. In 2019, the European Union was already boasting and saying to the world, in the next 5 years, we are going to be the largest legal cannabis market by 2024. As we witness these developments throughout the world, Madam Speaker, or should I say in the first world, we as a region were forced to take a second look at ourselves, our positions, our perspectives. So slowly we saw jurisdictions throughout the region opening up or softening their stance. I remember being a part of the consultations in 2019, 2020 as I traveled with the then Attorney General, going to UE and so on. And there were some people from different religious backgrounds, some who were for and some who were against. In a community or in a country like ours, you had to get the consultation. It was all about getting everybody on board so that we could have some great form of consensus. But not just in Trinidad and Tobago, throughout the region, countries or governments became more interested in decriminalizing marijuana, in softening our position because of that heavy burden these charges amongst youngsters had placed on our legal system. So time was ripe for legal reform. 100 years after the Opium Convention, Madam Speaker. So cannabis reform started picking up in the Caribbean. In 2014, and I think that I didn't hear other speakers mention it, but I think that we have to salute the CARICOM, because CARICOM decided in 2014 to create a commission on reform of marijuana, Madam Speaker, in order to give countries something to hold on to as we face our communities, as we face stakeholders, as we face first world countries. And part of the reason countries within the Caribbean, from Jamaica, which started in 2015 and going throughout the region, St. Vincent and so on, it is because of the support from the CARICOM heads of government meeting that was held in 2014, where this commission was established, and we had scholars from UE and all our different academic institutions in the region rolling up their sleeves and putting in the work to ensure that we had something to stand on, that our position as countries within CARICOM had to be based on science, had to be based on what we had seen coming out of the first world, based on their economic successes, and it was high time that we do justice to all people, or on behalf, in the best interest, in the development of our people. So I say kudos to CARICOM, because no one country would have wanted to go this alone. We were all timid or somewhat scared as to what would the Pentecostals think among us? What would the Methodists think among us? How would we be seen by the first world if we just up jump and legalize it? So, Madam Speaker, I think that CARICOM ought to be commended in this fight towards legal reform as it relates to treating with cannabis. Madam Speaker, I heard several speakers before mention that Trinidad and Tobago is coming late as it relates to this, but this wave of legal reform throughout the region really started in 2015, and you had countries doing their consultations and their research in 2016, 2017, 2018. Then you had the pandemic in 2020, and I remember when we were getting ready to come to Parliament in 2020, the opposition was out there crying, saying, oh, there are more important things to deal with in the country, and they want to take us to Parliament to talk about weed. Madam Speaker, here we are today. Here we are today doing our part, agreeing on both sides of the floor that this is important, not only to provide some sort of relief to our legal system, but towards advancing scientific research within the region, especially as it relates to cancer treatment and pain treatment. And for those of us who have experienced long COVID, if you've gone to as many doctors, somebody would have recommended to you cannabis oil. So I've heard speakers before me. The speaker before me spoke about cannabis oil and the research on the and research throughout the world. You have different doctors trying different means of medicine through cannabis, based on cannabis, towards providing some relief. The debate is still out there as it relates to utilizing cannabis for inflammatory diseases or conditions post-COVID, in long COVID, but we've heard from contributors before as it relates to cancer treatment. So I am happy that we as a government are here today to provide some relief, to catch up, Madam Speaker. And we are not just doing so ad hoc, because at the end of the day, decriminalization is one part of it, but having the controls, having the a regulated system is what is important in this revolutionary move. We have to make sure that we or locals benefit in developing industry, the small farmers, making sure that if we have to do business with major companies from throughout the world, that we are in a position where we are protected and we are well set and poised and positioned to really get some kind of economic benefit from this. Of course, funding is necessary for proper scientific research, and we have those matters being handled by the authority. So with that said, Madam Speaker, I want to give kudos to the members of the Joint Select Committee, the members of both sides of the House, who would have supported this piece of legislation, or should I say the Joint Select Committee report. And I think that we as a people should take this as a lesson in when we support something, or when we support proposals or recommendations at international conventions, or as we do business with the first world, we have to look at how does this affect us. And we have to be big and bold, as CARICOM was in 2014, to roll up our sleeves, get together, do the work, do the research, so we can hold each other's hands across the region and move with one force towards providing justice for our people. For me, I'm happy that we are moving beyond the narrow constraints of medical marijuana to embracing notions of social justice, human rights, economics, regional hegemony, and our right to health. May the miseducation that would have taken place over the years be replaced by sound education on cannabis and its benefits, and may we do all that we can to ensure that we put in the necessary research to develop this product and protect all local tradesmen, so that it would redound to the benefit of all of us and to all of Trinidad and Tobago. With that said, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
For point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to join this debate. Madam Speaker, before my presentation today, this is a critical report that the Parliament is trying to adopt here today, and it showed, when I read the report and I listened to some of the speakers before me, especially on the first day, the mover of the report, the member for San Fernando West, and others, Madam Speaker. It is some people would say it's a critical piece of legislation, report, bill, and I would agree somewhat, Madam Speaker. because there are both pros and cons, in my view, about this legislation that is before us here today, the report. Madam Speaker, when you look at the report itself, the GSE, you had both the opposition, the independent, and the government participating in this report. And as the previous speaker before me, Tobago West, she agreed, we both agree, that both opposition and government and independent was able to produce a report without a minority report, Madam Speaker. And that augurs well for what transpired in that Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on that Joint Select Committee, the one that is before us now, you had, I would say, very senior ministers, members. You had Member Young, Member Hines, Member Dayal Singh. I'm reading from the report, Madam Speaker. You had the member for San Fernando West, that's the chair. You had the member for Mayaro. You had the member for Kumuto Manzanilla. You had Senator Clarence Ramrat, at the time was Minister of Agriculture. You had Senator Gopi Schoon, Minister of Trade, Madam Speaker, and independent senators. And coming out of that committee, Madam Speaker, the committee was able to produce a report that augurs well for the country and the citizenry without any, as we normally would say that the opposition normally would say that the government, we would produce a minority report. The opposition did not produce a minority report. But that suffices to say, Madam Speaker, not that we did not have concerns. And I just want to repeat some of the concerns that the member for Mayaro, who was part of the opposition, who represented the opposition on that Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker. And I have to repeat some of his concerns. And I quote from the Hansard, Madam Speaker. And this is the member for Mayaro. And I quote, "Let me be clear from the outset. The opposition bench is fully supportive of the establishment of this burgeoning industry, as long as the legislation which protects the interests and rights of the citizen is closely monitored, Madam Speaker." So the opposition we have some concerns, but for the good of the country, coming out of the GSE, under the chair of San Fernando West, we were able to get some consensus, Madam Speaker. And I go on to voice some of his concerns. The member for Mayaro, we do have valid concerns, and I quote, which we would express in this debate, Madam Speaker. And all our speakers, Madam Speaker, on the opposition side who have spoken so far, while we're in agreement, we do have some concerns. We would have heard it from the member for Chaguanas West. You would have heard his points in respect of the legislation. You would have heard from the member from Fyzabad a couple of hours ago, Madam Speaker, his concerns from the medical point of view, Madam Speaker. So we do have some concerns. And I, as a member for Pointe-à-Pierre, I do have some concerns, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you look and you go back to the mover of this report, San Fernando West, Madam Speaker, and I just want to put it on the record, and I quote from his Hansard, San Fernando West, the GSE had held 18 meetings. They went through clause by clause. They met with stakeholders, Madam Speaker, critical stakeholders. They had 6 public consultations, and it was a robust, and if you listen to the members of San Fernando West, it was a robust, very robust report and robust committee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I listen closely to the member for Port of Spain, I want to get it right, Madam Speaker, Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West, the Minister of Energy, when on the last time that we debated this report, and the member for Port of Spain North and St. Anne's West spoke, and you listened to his debate, Madam Speaker, you would have sworn that he was not a member of that committee, Madam Speaker, because he was at odds. He was at odds with the entire, in my view, the GSA report, Madam Speaker. And I was shocked. And the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West is a key senior minister and was part of both GSCs, Madam Speaker. So we as an opposition, we are surprised of the kind of comments that member made in his debate, Madam Speaker. And I just want to go through some of his comments, because we came out, there's no minority report, and the opposition is in agreement with the government about this report. Yet we are being chastised by the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and somehow we get the impression that he wanted us to produce a minority report, Madam Speaker, because he's not in agreement. I get the view he's not in agreement with the work of the GSC that he was a member of. And I say that, and I want to quote some of his quotes, Madam Speaker, in his debate. Page 99 of the Hansard, and this is the Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, and I quote, "So it comes down to the legalizing and the commercializing of cannabis and marijuana for those on the opposite side, meaning the opposition, to unanimously say this is something that they would support. None of the previous important legislation, anti-gang, this and that, or the other, Madam Speaker." So if I can see what the member is saying, is that he is giving the impression that somehow this cannabis report that we in support because it is our legislation, Madam Speaker, this is the government legislation. This is the government work that the opposition is in support of, that the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West sat on. And if you listen to the chairman, San Fernando West, Madam Speaker, he was in full praise of the work done of all the members of the committee, Madam Speaker. So I asked, maybe the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West was absent for most of those meetings, or he did not read the final report that he signed, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to clarify that we on the opposition do support legislation that this government has brought. And somebody critical because the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West is given the impression we do not. But we only support this one because somehow it is about cannabis and marijuana. Madam Speaker, we supported the FATCA legislation. We supported the Anti-Gang 2018 legislation. We supported the Income Tax Amendment 2020. We supported the Sexual Offences Act 2019, Madam Speaker. So we do support critical pieces of legislation. And I just want to quote in the Hansard of the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, page 101. And I quote, "And I remember reflecting at the time and saying, wow, it has to come down to an addictive drug, something that has been destructive to many families, for the opposition to want to progress this forward for Trinidad." Madam Speaker, I repeat again, this is the member for San Fernando West brought this legislation to the House. This is the government's work, Madam Speaker. This is not the opposition work. So why would the member make these kind of comments in his debate after even the Minister of Health, the member for St. Joseph, was in high praise for all members for the good work that they did on that committee? So maybe in his winding up, the member for San Fernando West could add some clarity why there appear to be some pull and tugging between the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West and the members on the committee or even his government. And I will say why, and I will go further, Madam Speaker. Because even when the part for the local content, 30-70 of the foreign versus local, Madam Speaker, the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, sat on that committee. That was raised, Madam Speaker, in that committee. The member from Mayaro and some of the opposition members raised that as a concern, Madam Speaker. Yet, in that committee, Madam Speaker, why didn't the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, object to that? Why did he's now objecting in his debate? Because the member is saying, even when it comes to the regulation time, the member would have a lot to say at that point in time. Now, so I don't know if the member wants to come over by us and write his own minority report, Madam Speaker. But we are at odds. Clearly something is going on with that government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's a concern, as I said, that for me, as a member for Pointe-a-Pierre, and my colleague from member of Fyzabad touched on it, and it's about edibles, Madam Speaker. Edibles can be qualified as baked goods, chocolates, gummies, candies, Madam Speaker, and even, I think, some infused water, Madam Speaker. Now, edibles is something in clause 29D of the bill, Madam Speaker. And in my view, when I looked and I reviewed the report, and I mean it with all full respect to the San Fernando West and all members who sat on that committee, I do not know if the type of work that is required in respect of edibles, Madam Speaker, was done. And I stand to be corrected there. Madam Speaker, because edibles is very, very, in my view, very dangerous. And that is why I said I have some concerns. And when I did some research on edibles, Madam Speaker, and the side effects of edibles, and how it can affect children, Madam Speaker, I asked the government of the day to maybe pause or even add some importance, some strengthening of the legislation to protect the children or the young adults as far as edibles are concerned, Madam Speaker. Because when I did some research from the American point of view on the serious side effects of edibles, and I just want to quote, long-lasting effects, Madam Speaker. The effects of marijuana, and I quote, of marijuana edibles last much longer than smoking, usually up to several hours, depending on the amount of THC consumed. The unknown potency of edibles, Madam Speaker. The amount of THC is difficult to measure and is often unknown in many edibles. And these edibles I'm talking about, Madam Speaker, baked goods, cookies, gummy bears, chocolates, etc., Madam Speaker. Consequently, many products contain significantly more THC than labeled, and people who consume these edibles can be caught off guard by their strength and long-lasting effects. Then another part of the side effects, Madam Speaker, is delayed onset and high potential for overdose. While marijuana takes 30 minutes to set in, the effects of edibles may take 2 hours to set in, leading to overdosing as a person keeps consuming them. Research has shown that edibles are the form of marijuana consumption most likely to lead to emergency rooms visits for marijuana overdose, Madam Speaker. So these side effects are real, Madam Speaker. It is out there globally. It is not something that I am making up, and I'm very, as a member for Pointe-a-Pierre, I have a great concern about these edibles, Madam Speaker. Because you see, Madam Speaker, even right here in Trinidad, Madam Speaker, and before I get to the Trinidad experience as far as edibles, on a BBC on the 4th of April report 2022, a 23-year-old woman has died after eating synthetic cannabis sweets that was delivered to her door. A CBS report in the States on the 24th of July 2015, Madam Speaker, marijuana cookie death highlights need for warning labels. CDC says a 19-year-old jumps off a 4th-story balcony after eating 6 times the recommended dose of a marijuana cookie, Madam Speaker. In Jamaica in 2017, they were forced to ban the sale of cannabis-infused edibles because individuals were being overdosed, Madam Speaker. Right next door in Barbados, Barbados also prohibits the production, import, or sale of cannabis infused edibles, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, and right here in Trinidad, we had a situation as recent as last year, on March 16, 2021, where Trinidad Tobago position concerning edibles. And, Madam Speaker, in Trinidad, we had on the Trinidad Newsday report on the 16th of February 2020, police investigates marijuana edibles in school, Madam Speaker. So we had some issues back in 2020 where in Chaguanas, 5 children from Chaguanas ate brownies a student brought to school as part of a Valentine's Day celebration, Madam Speaker, while one child from Cuba bought the items from a vendor outside the school, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I listened to the member for Tobago West in her presentation, and she was comparing alcohol and the prohibition of alcohol versus smoking of weed, etc., Madam Speaker. But edibles, Madam Speaker, that we might want to just gleam over and not consider as important or life-threatening, Madam Speaker. Edibles, Madam Speaker, in my view, is a dangerous, dangerous retail product that if not properly labeled, not properly strengthened as far as the authority is concerned, Madam Speaker, we as a country can have issues in years to come, Madam Speaker. And another part of the concern that I have is cannabis and the banking industry, Madam Speaker. And I hope that the member for San Fernando West can add some clarity again, because there are a lot of banking issues in respect to the cannabis industry. I don't know if the GSC committee, the members had enough time to really flesh that out. And I'm hoping that the member of San Fernando West can add some clarity in that issue of banking issues as far as corresponding banking, because, you know, we have so much issues in the banking industry, Madam Speaker, in respect of money laundering, etc. And I am asking, how does this, when this legislation gets into place and become operationalized in respect to the banking issues, how is the government today, or as a country, as industry, we're going to be dealing with that, Speaker? Now, Speaker, there are some positives coming out of this legislation. And the positive that could be in someone, as an industry, is the tourism industry, Madam Speaker. And when you do some research, they are now branding in some countries bud and breakfast as a tourism marketing tool, Madam Speaker. So he talks about what is cannabis tourism, given that we are now coming out of a pandemic, COVID, recovering for the past 2 years as an economy, Madam Speaker. Maybe this legislation is timely, that we can get some added revenues as a country. Even our small and medium businesses can get into this kind of industry, Madam Speaker. This industry is not for, in my view, not for any and everyone, but it is a thriving industry globally. And you have heard the big numbers that the member from ARO would have spoken about. And there's a whole industry under cannabis as far as tourism, Madam Speaker. So, you know, it is there for research to be done. I don't know, again, how the GSC committee members or even the chairman had thought about cannabis tourism as an industry, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, there's a lot of pros and cons, as I said, of this industry. But I want to stick a pin, really and truly, Madam Speaker. While we traverse new ground as far as this industry is concerned, I as a member for Point-de-Pierre, I'm asking for the member for San Fernando West and his government to really strengthen the authority and give them the operation strength that is required, Madam Speaker, so that in maybe 5 years, 10 years' time from today, Madam Speaker, that we as a society do not live to regret this legislation, Madam Speaker. So with those few words, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for La Hawketta Talparo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate on the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. And Madam Speaker, I know that there have been many speakers before me who have touched on many areas of the report, so that I will attempt certainly not to repeat the points that have been made, but to say that the government, of course, has focused in 2019 on the decriminalization of marijuana. It's a most welcome decision, Madam Speaker, and we now take the courageous move to bring legislation to treat with the regulation of the industry. It's a step in the right direction for persons who utilize cannabis for medical reasons, for religious reasons, and for other reasons. I represent the constituency of La Hawketta Talparo, and it's welcome, this move of the government, particularly as it relates to our young people and those who may have had their lives restricted and their future restrained in relation to convictions for the possession of small quantities of marijuana or weed or sensimania or the herb, many other names associated with this herb called cannabis. Many persons were, prior to the decriminalization, as I mentioned, convicted for small quantities of marijuana. This interfered, speakers before me I believe mentioned it, but this interfered with their ability to gain jobs. And of course, we know all too well of the thriving business, the village business, the block, with all the associated illegal activities that come with it. It is almost as though that is what the young entrepreneur in the community, many rural communities, but certainly in urban communities as well, where that block, the major activity is the illegal sale and trading of marijuana joints. And the protection of that and the known association with gang activities, the associated relationship with guns and ammunition, and the violence that comes with it to protect the turf and to protect the borders of operation. These individuals are looked upon by other young persons as the role models that they would like to look up to and become as successful because of their activities associated with the trade in marijuana. And then you have, coming with that, the amount of time it consumes for law enforcement agencies. And certainly, as the move of the motion, the Honourable Member for San Fernando West indicated, the clogging of the judicial system and the many cases associated with cannabis possession and that clog the judicial system. I think what was mentioned is some 6,600 cases annually, now down to 1,400, or a monthly drop of 551, from 551 to 114. This, Madam Speaker, is a significant achievement by this administration, and it has brought considerable relief to the magistrates' court, and as well address the question of the stigma associated with cannabis use. I think that as a parliament today, that the country takes note of the cooperation between the government and the opposition. I want to commend the work of the Joint Select Committee for bringing us to this stage. It is not often that we have, notwithstanding the points raised by the previous speaker in relation to the number of bills or legislation that the opposition has supported that the government brought. I think the list of bills that they have not supported is significantly longer. But notwithstanding that, it is good that we have gotten to this point today, Madam Speaker. For many years, the government has been plagued with many issues, critical issues affecting our society, and in particular, the drug trade. And how do we address all of these activities, these criminal activities associated with the drug trade? And from time to time, I would listen to the contribution of the member for San Fernando West in his previous incarnation in the ministry he served in prior to moving to this new ministry, speaking about relief required in the judicial system and the clogging in the magistrate's court, matters taking a very long time to be heard and determined. And certainly, this action taken by the government in 2019 with the decriminalization of marijuana, I know from the statistics given to us by the member, has significantly addressed that matter, Madam Speaker. The future of our young people, in many cases, was stymied as a result of their issues with the law in relation to the use and possession of marijuana. And so now...
So, Member, I think I've given you some time. This bill is not about the decriminalization, and I think you may have used that for context, and please, let's get on with the report.
Guided, Madam Speaker. So that we have reached to the point, Madam Speaker, where we are treating with the regulation of the cannabis industry and Madam Speaker, the benefits that will come from the establishment of the authority as mentioned in the report. It is a comprehensive strategy, I believe, for the economic development and diversification. And of course, this requires proper management and the relevant human capital. The bill requires members serving on the board to have at least 5 years' experience, and this is outlined in Clause 6, Madam Speaker. And the management of this new industry, I think, will bring significant benefits to the agricultural sector and to those entrepreneurs who wish to take advantage of this new and very interesting industry. It should be noted, Madam Speaker, that according to CNN Business, sales within the cannabis industry in 2020 hit $20 billion globally and is projected to reach up to $45 billion in 2025. It is in fact a growing industry, and this bill takes account of the entire supply chain associated with the cannabis industry. It will impact the agricultural aspect of it. It will impact the manufacturing. It will impact research and development, particularly in areas of the medical use, and of course, retail and export as well. Statista indicates that there are about 200 million global users of cannabis. This is a very large population, Madam Speaker, when you look at it in relation to our small two-liner state of just 1.3 million people. It is therefore commendable that the bill also caters for issues in relation to the granting of export licenses and the significant economic benefits that will be associated with that. Madam Speaker, this move generates significant fiscal benefits to the government of Trinidad and Tobago through license fees and taxes. And if we look at the state of California, which is noted as being one of the largest markets for cannabis, some $1 billion in tax revenue for cannabis, Madam Speaker. It is therefore in our best interest to move in this direction. And in relation to the cultivation issues, Madam Speaker, it also brings significant benefits to the farmers, both on a small scale and a large scale, who will have an interest in this new industry, as it will also allow them to actively participate in the cultivation. Madam Speaker, it addresses the issue of the black market associated with cannabis that has plagued us for several decades. And this legislation allows for mitigation of the supply of cannabis on the black market, which, as I mentioned before, is at the heart of a lot of the issues, the illegal issues associated with the cannabis industry. We have heard several speakers speak about the benefits, some of them practicing medical doctors. The member for Fyzabad spent some time on that as well, and therefore I do not propose to go into that area, except to say that we know that for the Rastafarian community, and I do not suggest that I'm anywhere close to being a Rastafarian, but we know that, of course, that community uses that herb for religious purposes. Madam Speaker, it was in 2014, I believe, that the CARICOM heads of government decided on the setting up of a regional marijuana commission. And in 2018, discussions were held regarding what steps should be taken for individual states to review the current status of cannabis use and the attendant regulation. As part of the discussions coming out of that meeting was the need for countries to determine its own pathway of pursuing law reforms, and these reforms were proposed by the Regional Marijuana Commission, as well to explore the potential of cannabis being a controlled substance and the management that will be associated with such regulations. The decriminalization is just one side of the discussion. The other aspect of discussion is what we are doing here today, which is discussing how do we formulate an entity to legalize the use of this industry of cannabis for medical, for research, for religious purposes, and of course the establishment of this regulatory body to approve licenses for the cannabis business. One of the major elements, Madam Speaker, of the legislation will treat with the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority as a body corporate with responsibility for regulatory control and the handling of cannabis. This authority will conduct several key procedures, including the appointment of a board of directors, the appointment of a CEO, the employment of staff, the engagement of experts, advisors and consultants, the issuance of several types of licensing for specific medicinal, therapeutic, and scientific purposes. Madam Speaker, these measures will lead to increased opportunities, which include the potential for higher levels of employment and business opportunities for new entrepreneurs, as would come with any other new industry. And I must say that the world is moving in that direction. In the region, we should take credit because several of our jurisdictions have already taken steps in relation to...
Okay, so member, I'd like to invite you to go on to something new. We're kind of late in the day, and I think we may really be coming, treading on the grounds of tedious repetition. All of this is ground that has been covered. So I'll invite you to treat with something differently in the report.
Speaking late in the debate, particularly in a matter like this that has common attention on both sides of the House, I want to say, Madam Speaker, that I wish to once again commend the committee for the work that it has done in bringing us to this point. It is a legislation that I support, that really requires and the support of all of us. And in so doing, I wish to thank you for my opportunity to contribute.
Member for Maruga Tebalan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to present today on the Cannabis Control Bill. I'm thankful for allowing me to join this debate.
Right now we're on the report. Okay, so I just want to guide everyone. What we're dealing with is the report. All right?
Really noted, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to present on this Joint Select Committee report. Madam Speaker, before us, this legislative framework would establish the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority, the body that would govern license for the cultivation, distribution, sale, import, and export of cannabis for medicinal use. We are well aware of the culture of cannabis used in Trinidad and Tobago and by extension the Caribbean. Madam Speaker, in our local art fraternity, we hail our local reggae singers like Prophet Benjamin with his famous song Coming from Moruga, the area for which I am the Member of Parliament. We also hail Marlon Asher, who would have sung Ganja Planter. These songs are not just songs, Madam Speaker, but are melodies of the culture of Trinidad and Tobago, specifically with cannabis and its use. As such, Madam Speaker, this bill is long overdue, and the members on this side are in support of this bill or this legislation that would establish a fair and transparent licensing regime. But before me, Madam Speaker, I am not sure that in its current state or form that we can adopt this. If it is to be adopted in its current form, Madam Speaker, it can stand to be a runaway horse. Effective implementation must guide this legislative framework because the consequences can be dire. We have to think about our future, particularly those of the youths. The committee report as of July 2021 addresses many of the preliminary concerns of the bill when it was first laid in Parliament in or about October 2021. Madam Speaker, where was the Cabinet Policy Directive or the policy guidelines from the Ministry of Health or even the Attorney General's Office to guide the drafting of this legislation? What were the policy considerations or the data examined to boost the people's economic gain? Where are the several regulations or subsidiary legislation from the former AG, Madam Speaker, as he was saying that it would fix the present state of the bill? I will further establish this point, Madam Speaker, as I develop my argument here today. Let me start off by saying, Madam Speaker, Moruga currently has a large group of cannabis farmers, which is part and parcel of the Cannabis Growers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and which is a duly registered entity. Currently, that group represents over 10,000 cannabis farmers in Trinidad and Tobago, nearly 1,000 of which are from Moruga alone. I would have hoped, Madam Speaker, that as a matter of due diligence, this duly registered group would have been consulted on. The fact of the matter remains they were not. As such, Madam Speaker, it was strange that the member for San Fernando West said consultations were made with 30 different agencies. Yet was the Cannabis Growers Association consulted for the cannabis bill or legislation before us here today, Madam Speaker? No. Despite the member for Port of Spain putting it on the record that he will not allow this bill to benefit a few or that they do not work by exclusion, the government's actions continue to say differently. We know of their promises, Madam Speaker. They speak of protecting farmers. Farmers that we know that they don't protect. Madam Speaker, their track record and their history would show that they don't protect the farmers of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, in an article dated February 12, 2016, it relayed 5 held in 1.4 Moruga drug bust. This is a Guardian newspaper article. And an online report from CNC3, July 2021, sought would have seized 96.8 kilos of marijuana in Moruga. That roughly is 320 kilograms of cannabis, would have been estimated at a street value of $2.5 million. And
Speaker, Standing Order 4410 and 48-1.
Okay, so as far as 4410. I mean, it's a debate, and, I'll ask members, we're a bit seasoned now, not to be so tightly tied to their notes. Okay, as 48-1, I'll give you a little leeway for me to see where you're going with that, member for Maruga Tibala.
Appreciated, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, these articles are just to show that cannabis or marijuana is big business in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it tells us that cultivation and trade of marijuana, again, is big business. But what is being presented here, it also tells us that our local farmers are put at some serious risk and soon to be out of business. Madam Speaker, this bill is a slightly modified version of the provisions of Barbados. This is ironic, I might add, since I think the government only uses comparison from our CARICOM counterparts when it suits the agenda. Madam Speaker, I do wish for our market not to be monopolized by foreign entities. Despite the ownership of the board having 30%, there is still room that it would be monopolized from foreign entities. And I will show this as I develop my argument, Madam Speaker. What this bill misses, Madam Speaker, is consultation from small farmers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The bill has struggled to find a way to include the island's small farmers in this new industry in which Trinidad and Tobago is slowest to move into. I have listened to the members from the opposite bench, and they give an excuse for Trinidad and Tobago's slow progression for the regularization of the medicinal cannabis. I will begin my contribution on Clause 5 of the bill. Under Clause 5, Section 4, the minister may give the authority general policy directions that must be implemented by the authority. It must be that the policy directions must not be unilateral decisions of the minister and must be cabinet approved before
4410 again.
Yeah, so member, again, it is quite obvious that you're really very tied to your notes. This is a debate, and while you do have notes, remember it's a debate, and you'll have to, debate. Okay? So please.
Madam Speaker, thank you for your guidance, and I wish to continue. In continuing, Madam Speaker, this is because of the nature of the issue. Madam Speaker, as I highlighted previously, cannabis is big business in this country. So we would like to see some form of accountability when it comes to Clause 5, Section 4. But it is of noteworthy concern, Madam Speaker, that some of the illicit provisions within the bill that I will address, despite the policy considerations which Parliament is yet to see.
Madam Speaker, it appears as though your ruling a moment ago is being completely ignored. I rise again on Standing Order 4410, Madam Speaker, out of due respect and courtesy to your chair. Madam Speaker.
Okay, so again, member from a rural table, and you've debated before. It's not that it's a maiden contribution, and you've got to make an effort. All right, so I'll ask you again, and please, let's don't rise on this again. Okay?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm so guided. Madam Speaker, as I continue, I would like to move to another substantive point that I had here, Madam Speaker. I will move to Clause 6, Madam Speaker. Under Clause 6, Section 5, Madam Speaker, and I'm looking at the member as he attempts to rise to interrupt me again. And he was held back by the goodly Minister of Health. Agreed,
address the
Madam Speaker.
contribution here. And just remember, any member could rise on any standing order. That's part of what we do, and I rule on it. Okay?
Right. Madam Speaker, as I continue. Clause 6, Section 5. Madam Speaker, there should be a cap on the number of terms a person can be appointed to the board of the authority. And this is necessary, Madam Speaker, as we would want the board to be not influenced by political entities. Madam Speaker, and we would have seen the history of this throughout several boards within Trinidad and Tobago that would have been recently constituted.
Standing Order 55-1B, that was said ad nauseum on the last day, and 4410 again.
So, remember, sometimes the difficulty with coming late in the debate, a lot of the ground would have been traversed by several speakers. Okay, so there's been a lot of discussion about the appointments to the board, the term of the appointees, the types of licenses, the small man. I've tried to give you some leeway, but again, I'll invite you to come to a new point in the report so that we can progress with the debate. All right? I do uphold the objection under Standing Order 55-1B.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your continued guidance during this debate. I really appreciate it. As I'll move on to another clause with regards to Clause 30, Madam Speaker, when it speaks with regards to the local ownership of the board. We deal with that clause having 30% local ownership. Madam Speaker, and I would raise that clause in light of one of my main points during my debate that I want to stress with regards to the social equity program. Madam Speaker, the reason why I would raise a social equity program with regards to that clause, when we have a mandating of the local ownership of the board.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 55-1B, that issue of 30% ownership has been beaten to death by the opposition last week, Wednesday, and today.
Like how Le Pen get beaten in France.
Remember, again, I will have to rule in favor of the objection when it comes to the 30-70% distribution of companies and partnerships in the business.
I'm so guided again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but if you would allow me, what this bill will do, which the PNM government has failed to address, is allow large entities, local large organizations, or regional and international entities come into ply trade of small farmers. Madam Speaker, small farmers that would have been prosecuted.
Speaker, 55-1B, you just ruled on the matter.
Members, okay. So, yes, member, could you please go to a new area? The small farmers related to the 30%, the 70%, all of that. You yourself, as you, in a couple of minutes you've spoken about small farmers. So please, let's get on to something new. Give you as much leeway as I can.
Noted again, Madam Speaker, and I'm so guided. Madam Speaker, as I searched through my notes to find something that was not raised. Madam Speaker, I would like to speak with regards to the tracking aspect of the bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in my point of view, it was left out, the tracking aspect. And the tracking aspect, it is something that is very apparent in all the different regions. And we see that the government would have been guided by the notes or guided by the legislations from all the different regions. But this is something that they would have left out when compiling the bill here today, or even the report from the Joint Select Committee, where with a lack of tracking, they also, with regards to the financial transaction, Madam Speaker, this will allow us to say with regards to the different areas that the cannabis would have come from. Would it been from the legal entity or from legal means, Madam Speaker? So this is something that I would like clarity when the AG rise on his legs to do wind up with regards to why any kind of tracking mechanisms was left out of the legislation. Madam Speaker, I would also like to raise with regards to my local cannabis farmers and with regards to the use of the agro-processing facility that was recently built by this current administration. Madam Speaker, because if that...
Could you just point me to where you are in the report, both on the tracking and this agro-processing? If you could point me to that, then I could link the report and what you're saying to this debate and to maybe a provision in the bill that has been recommended by the Joint Select Committee.
So guided, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in light that I'm joining this debate in the latter stages and most of the substantive points would have been raised, I would like to thank you for the few moments that you would have given me here today to debate. And I would like to thank the members of this honorable House and all the members of the opposition that would have contributed thus far.
Member for San Fernando West. Member, you have 30 minutes to wind up.
Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to wind up the debate on the report for adoption before this committee. Of course, that report is the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. Madam Speaker, suffice it to say that there is agreement in this House today, and therefore the first order of business is to express my gratitude as the chairman of the committee for all of the contributions that came to this House, Madam Speaker. It is the work of two successive committees that brought us to the work product before us, Madam Speaker. And I am very concerned to lay on record gratitude for all of the committee members, which includes, Madam Speaker, those who served in the committee established to look at the 2019 bill as well. Madam Speaker, the benefits of the law, if this committee delivers the bill attached as the fourth schedule into law, and that is Appendix 4 that I refer to, the benefits of the law are to be factored right alongside the structure of law that operates with this. I want to remind you, Madam Speaker, that we are dealing with the Dangerous Drugs Act that articulates with this. I would like to remind that we are also dealing with the laws that treat with our medical practitioners. We're dealing with the laws that treat with our pharmacists. We're dealing with special economic zones in parts, as that becomes part and parcel of the law. And if you look at Appendix 4, Madam Speaker, and you look to Section 3, Clause 3, Subclause 4, there's a very important provision here. The provisions of the Dangerous Drugs Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Medical Board Act, and the Pharmacy Board Act shall not prohibit or otherwise restrict or render unlawful the cultivation, processing, extraction, distribution, import, export, possession, or other handling of cannabis in accordance with the provisions of this Act. I want to remind, Madam Speaker, again in Clause 3 of the bill attached as Appendix 4, that the definition of handling in relation to cannabis includes the use, cultivation, processing, importation, exportation, transport, transit, transshipment, manufacture, sale, distribution, and possession of cannabis. The conducting of scientific research, testing, analytical services for the purposes of improving or developing cannabis, but does not include the use of medicinal cannabis by a person pursuant to a prescription or recommendation. Now, I've started there in Annex 4 in these provisions specifically to respond to the contributions coming opposite. With respect to the member for Moruga Tableland, the honourable member said that she wished to speak. The honourable member spoke to the cultivators of cannabis in her constituency. And I would like to remind the honourable member that cultivation of cannabis is not permitted by law under any circumstances other than as provided in the Dangerous Drugs Act as amended in 2019, where one is permitted, each individual, to have 4 growing cannabis plants. Now, Madam Speaker, I say that because even though we take the step in producing this report and in delivering for recommendation before this House the Annex 4, which is the bill, the Cannabis Control Bill, I'd like to remind that we are obliged to obey the law. We are obliged to be conscious in our reflections that this is a progressive step. Now, permit me to explain that. Madam Speaker, it's a fact, a scientific fact. I get the extreme pleasure of having in 2019 delivered for the government the proposition that there would be a significant benefit in decriminalization and dangerous drugs amendments reflected on in this report. We have statistical evidence that there's been a 76% drop in caseload. We have statistical evidence coming from the Forensics Institute that there has been a massive decline in use of time to examine plant-like substance for cases in court, and instead that they can focus upon big areas. But Madam Speaker, the law that we bring about here is intended to work along with regulations. Now, if I can speak to the work of the committee in this report and answer my colleagues, we were very careful in the committee to make a strong distinction between medicinal, therapeutic use of cannabis, and that, Madam Speaker, is in Clause 29 of the bill. The authority may issue the following licenses for medicinal, therapeutic, or scientific purposes, and there are 8 licenses. And then we have religious licenses. So there are 2 ways that you can use this. In answer to my colleagues opposite who are medical practitioners, the use of a recommendation versus a prescription was very purposefully thought of by the committee. The recommendation is for the psychological and other uses that are beyond medical categorization. A prescription is intended to treat with medical categorization. Madam Speaker, permit me to stop at this point and recognize that the work of this committee is not, as the Honourable Member for Moruga Tableland put it, a cut and paste of Barbados. No, Honourable Member, through you, Madam Speaker, this is the work of our committee, which factored amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act, which factored the Cannabis Control Bill, and which factored expert advice that we received from the CARICOM. And the work of the committee in the report demonstrates that we were guided by expertise in Jamaica, in Canada, and, Madam Speaker, in Barbados. And I'd like to flag a few local experts. In particular, there is a gentleman by the name of Mr. Marcus Ramkisoon, someone who has been an advocate for the prescriptive detail of law when it comes to the cannabis industry. And I'd like to address recommendations coming from experts, including Mr. Ramkisoon, through you, as they feature in the recommendations of the report, to remind that we are moving towards a great detail of prescription, the fine detail of the law in the regulations which will be produced under the law, Madam Speaker. That treated what Pointe-a-Pierre had to say. The member for Pointe-a-Pierre made a very important point shared by all members of the committee. That is, in treating with the benefits against the risks, in particular to our children. And when we look at the risks to our children, Madam Speaker, I want to remind that the law is specific and clear, as Annex 4 demonstrates in the committee's report, that we protect children. There must be strict medical supervision. There must be strict prescriptive use by medical practitioners. In this law, Madam Speaker, that we propose in this report, we are asking that every aspect of the chain, of the link, from where the plant is grown, to how it is consumed, to who consumes it, to how it is destroyed, to the therapeutic use, to the patient information and confidentiality provisions, every step of the transaction is mapped out in the prescriptive form of the law proposed by this report, but it will be in much greater detail set out in the regulations that come via the authority which is to be established under this law. Those regulations, Madam Speaker, will ultimately come down to an explosion of care and caution versus economic opportunity. I want to compliment my colleague for Toco Sangre Grande, the Honorable Roger Monroe, in being a champion for rural community development, because it was my colleague who pointed out to me that the opportunity in rural communities in particular from an economic standpoint is tremendous. Now we know, Madam Speaker, from the arrests and convictions under the rubric of gathering and cultivation of cannabis, again reflected on in this report, that it is the people in our rural communities that have been caught. They are often stranded in terms of geography. The access to rural communities is difficult. As Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, that is my task, to deal with the 80% road network. But in the meanwhile, Madam Speaker, this bill offered by this report provides an economic opportunity that I've heard my colleague speak to. And therefore I say through you respectfully that the work of this report demonstrates a tremendous economic opportunity. Because what do we have growing for us? What do we have going for us in Trinidad and Tobago? Relatively safe geopositioning outside the hurricane belt, tropical climate, one of the most aggressive intellectual property arenas in the world. Madam Speaker, you may not know this, but the Office of the Attorney General Intellectual Property Office took 5 out of 6 conventions into law in 1 year alone, Madam Speaker. And why was that an aggressive item in the Office of the Attorney General? Because geopatenting of our DNA, of our type, of the genealogical positions of the genus of cannabis as defined in this bill, in this report, Madam Speaker, it means that we have the opportunity to present our cannabis as an origin indicator of worth, much like champagne is for sparkling wines, Madam Speaker. So for persons in rural communities, and I wish to compliment my colleague in particular for having drawn this to my attention, this is a tremendous opportunity. Now, Madam Speaker, member for Pointe-a-Pierre and a couple of others raised the issue of criminality and the concern about the banking industry, correspondent banking. The member for Pointe-a-Pierre raised that a while ago. It's a very good observation. It's why in the report you will see that the bill attached to the report starts off in the definition section of a specific position, the first defined term at clause 3 at page 31 of the report is AML CFT PF. What does that mean? Anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism and proliferation financing. It also includes a reference to controller, and a controller in relation to a religious organization has the meaning assigned to it in section 3.1 of the Non-Profit Organizations Act. It also includes, Madam Speaker, the reference to subclause 4 of clause 3, which I pointed out, the Proceeds of Crime Act, and therefore this law is intended to specifically treat with the corresponding banking and banking issues to make sure that people who go into the industry of cannabis can be banked, that their money can be brought into the system, that the legality of the system can work. Because you cannot be a non-profit organization unless you are registered. You cannot be a non-profit organization unless your AML, CFT, PF forms are done. And law enforcement has access to those forms if you look at the non-profit organization. The Proceeds of Crime Act, law enforcement has access to every aspect of this chain. Madam Speaker, when you get now to the other provisions which show why you can be banked, why there's no risk of correspondent banking failure, the law also provides for acknowledgement of what we call Recommendation 35 of the Financial Action Task Force. And that is to be found in Clause 65 and Clause 67 of the bill, where we specifically treat with the introduction of administrative fines. What are administrative fines? Administrative fines are an alternative to prescribed summary offenses, so that if you are given a notice that you are potentially guilty of a summary offense, that you have the option to pay an administrative fine. That finds itself in origin from Recommendation 35 of the Financial Action Task Force, Madam Speaker. So in answer to the member for Pointe-a-Pierre's concern about corresponding banking, about making sure that people who have an opportunity to make serious money in a serious industry, that they have the chance. Now permit me to address something as well. Madam Speaker, there has been expressed concern about our participation in international treaties. And I want to refer specifically to the international narcotics control arena brought about by international conventions which we are in parties to, and part of which laws we have on our books. Remember, we're a dualistic society. Our laws are made, our international laws become local law when we make them local law, and until they're local law, the international treaty is just on the outside. So, Madam Speaker, I want to remind that that's where the Proceeds of Crime Act and the Dangerous Drugs Act came about. And, Madam Speaker, it is important to recognize that what we are saying to Trinidad and Tobago after 2 joint select committees, after decriminalization on the 23rd of December 2019, Madam Speaker, many people in Trinidad and Tobago literally celebrated the proclamation of the Dangerous Drugs Act Amendment. And Madam Speaker, it gives me immense pride to participate in a government that had the courage to do that, Madam Speaker. Because the benefit to the average human being in Trinidad and Tobago is tremendous. And Madam Speaker, as a member of Parliament for San Fernando West, my 11 HDC communities, my some 2,500 people who live in squatting conditions, Madam Speaker, I can testify, as many of my colleagues can, of the hardship of locking up people for 2 joints. And Madam Speaker, what we're proposing now for people who are inclined to agriculture, In this report, we are proposing an opportunity for economic profit, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, for the people of San Fernando West, who I speak for in this House, with the nameplate being not Faris Al-Rawi, not Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, but being member for San Fernando West, I would like to say for San Fernando West that my constituents all line up, as all of our constituents surely do, behind the economic opportunity that this bill offers. This report makes a recommendation that 30% of any entity going into the development of cannabis as an industry, that 30% of people who will get licenses, Madam Speaker, have to have local content. I'd like to remind, Madam Speaker, that is not a small number. And we ought not to be xenophobic and think that we can do it by ourselves. There is nothing wrong with big industry participating in Trinidad and Tobago, provided that we have local content factor. Now, what I found strange is that the member for Naparima didn't speak in this debate, because the member for Naparima, who is perhaps exploring acquiring another passport, perhaps in Guyana, is an advocate of the local content laws in some other jurisdictions. And when you look, Madam Speaker, at the local content in this law, I thought that the member for Naparima would have been jumping up and down to say, local content in Trinidad and Tobago law, look, the PNM government ensuring 30% of the companies in large enterprise in a country like ours, where we can grow agriculture indoors, outdoors, hard concrete, hydroponics, in the field, in rural community. I thought my friend from Naparima would certainly have been an advocate of that. But I guess it's only Barbados and only Le Pen and only Guyana that intrigues my colleague opposite. Perhaps that's why he didn't participate. So, Madam Speaker, local content anchored in this report, Madam Speaker, is a huge factor, because your committee, Madam Speaker, explored what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, in Barbados, and we were very mindful, Madam Speaker, that we needed to preserve the local content. Minister Hines, as he sat then in the office of the Attorney General, the Minister of National Security, walked up and down Trinidad and Tobago with me in my capacity as then Attorney General, and participated in lively debate in demonstrating the public consultation for the work that this committee considered. And I wish to publicly commend my colleague, the Honourable Minister of National Security, for his dedication to this exercise, because, Madam Speaker, the people for Laventille West also stand behind this particular bill, also stand behind this report, because they too want to have their opportunity for success. And, Madam Speaker, what this committee's report demonstrates is money can grow on trees, and that money growing on trees has an economic potential which must be balanced against the risks to society. It's why the committee's report, Madam Speaker, focuses very clearly on criminalizing conduct that jeopardizes the most vulnerable. It's why the committee considered the report that caregivers have to be included in this, why parents have express liability in respect of their children, why in respect of the religious purposes that we can have in an absolute prohibition against the commercial activity in religious organizations. Because, Madam Speaker, if you're an adherent to the religious faith that may apply for a religious license under Clause 29 of the bill, as the report recommends, you have to make sure that it's under strict conditions. And the dispensary aspects, the control aspects, who receives, where those records are, all part of the subsidiary legislation, meaning the regulations to be produced under Clause 68 of the law, Madam Speaker, as it is proposed. So, Madam Speaker, on behalf of the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I can certainly say that there is great excitement. Madam Speaker, there were many people along the way that had great doubts and fears about the propriety of a law such as this. Our Honorable Prime Minister, in acting in his capacity as the head of the cabinet, in considering our very diverse views, and Madam Speaker, I'd like to say this publicly, in our cabinet, there is no position other than robust intellectual debate. There is collective responsibility. But Madam Speaker, we are not people afraid to deal with issues. Sometimes issues can be tough. Sometimes there will be disagreement. But Madam Speaker, it is our Honorable Prime Minister who quite publicly put me in my place, at least on one occasion, in relation to this law in the early days, and for good reason, reminding that there had to be cabinet approval of policy, Madam Speaker. The cabinet approved policy led by our Honorable Prime Minister is that we need to take our heads out of the sand. We need to protect the most vulnerable. We need to ensure that there's a careful commercialization. We need to ensure that our children are protected. And I'd like to say to the Honorable Prime Minister, thank you for having the courage to support law such as this, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are definitely, if I could put this forward for people who are listening, we are definitely going to see certain amendments to the law when the authority comes into effect. When the authority comes into effect, there will be further revisions on the law. We have left space for the authority to be created. The authority will then take best practices, develop the regulations under Section 68. Those regulations come for affirmative resolution in the Parliament. Those regulations will allow us to deal with any international concerns that may come our way. There will be tightening up of provisions. So I'm giving notice that the approach that the government has taken, which is to start. Madam Speaker, our friends opposite had their turn at the wheel on many occasions. The member for Siparia served in the NAR government. The member for Siparia served in a UNC government. The member for Siparia served as an attorney general for a couple of months in this country. The member for Siparia served as prime minister. I'm talking about 15 years of operation, Madam Speaker. Is there a point of order?
Or the lead member for Siparia.
Madam Speaker, as I was saying in answer to the debate, the member for Siparia for 15 years had an opportunity to treat with laws such as this, but regrettably, there was no courage. Regrettably. And Madam Speaker, what I'm saying in the context of this report signals hope for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The member for Pointe-a-Pierre was right. Coming out of a COVID-19 pandemic and transferring ourselves now into an endemic stage, Madam Speaker, in climbing down from our reliance on oil and gas, Madam Speaker, we, the People's National Movement, as the government of this country, are proud to offer an opportunity to people in the cannabis industry because it is intended to be regulated in a very strict way. And Madam Speaker, to all young entrepreneurs out there, get ready, Madam Speaker. Get ready and set for a diversified economy which includes cannabis as an option under strict regulation. Madam Speaker, I don't think that there's anything more to add to this particular motion to adopt this report other than to say those careful words, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The report is therefore adopted.
Bill's second reading.
Member for San Fernando West.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 66-4, I beg to move that a bill entitled an act to provide for the regulatory control of the handling of cannabis for certain purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority and connected matters be forthwith read a second time.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Regulatory Control of the Handling of Cannabis for Certain Purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority and connected matters be now read a second time. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Regulatory Control of the Handling of Cannabis for Certain Purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority and connected matters.
Member for San Fernando West.
Madam Speaker, as provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause. All in favour say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. To the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause. This bill has 68 clauses.
Madam Speaker, in the circumstances, may I suggest that we suspend for about 10 minutes, ma'am? Because I know my friends would be at a well.
Okay, so let me
not
ask.
my friends, but the other side.
How many amendments are there?
Madam Speaker, there are 6 short amendments, which are 5 of which are very minor. The word or, semicolon, and, etc.
Okay.
But Madam Speaker, I'd like them circulated.
Sure. I mean, all amendments should be circulated.
Of course.
What I would ask, member, do you have in paper form a copy that you can just show to the whip so that we can decide
Yes.
whether this suspension is 10 minutes or more?
Sure.
Okay, and I just want to say for us going forward, to the Leader of the House, I'd appreciate if all amendments are circulated. We are still in the throes of the pandemic, and as members would know, we don't suspend for tea. Okay, and this is causing me to breach something that I'm trying to avoid.
Okay.
So, 1 minute, please. So, Leader of the House, I am putting this squarely in your lap.
Yes, ma'am. It has been rightly placed in my lap, and I accept it. Madam Speaker, I apologize on behalf of this side.
Member for Point of Peer.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, with all due respect to the member for San Fernando West, when he moved the report, he had mentioned that he had amendments. So I was surprised that those I thought he withdrew it, because I am surprised that we are now getting these amendments at this late stage, Madam Speaker. And I respectfully submit that statement for the answer.
Madam Speaker, I apologize to the House for the difficulties. When my learned friend has a chance to have a view, I'm sure it'll make sense. But I accept full responsibility, Madam Speaker, because it is in my instruction that should have been given I wound up much sooner than I expected I'd have to because of the collapse opposite.
All right. So, member for point of view. If I suspend for 15 minutes, would that be sufficient?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Yes? Okay. So this committee meeting is suspended. It is now 4:32. So we'll come back here at 4:45.
Dinesh.
Yes? Okay.
Dinesh.
This committee meeting is now suspended.